The first sign that something was wrong with Fen was not the growl. It was the way the royal wolf stopped looking at his king. Nora Whitlock noticed it from the edge of the Moon Oath courtyard. Hundreds of nobles and pack representatives stood beneath silver banners while braziers burned along the stone circle. At the center, Alpha King Adrian Vare waited beside Fen, his enormous silver-gray wolf, for the renewal oath to begin. Fen should have been watching Adrian. Instead, he kept jerking his head toward his own shoulder. Nora narrowed her eyes. The ceremonial collar around his neck was new. Black leather reinforced with silver fittings and stamped with the royal crest. She had seen enough shifting harnesses to know how they were supposed to sit. 2 fingers of space at the throat. Flexible stitching along the inner curve. Nothing that could catch when a wolf's muscles expanded. Fen's collar had none of that. The leather was drawing inward. Nora took 1 step forward. A palace guard blocked her with an arm. Ceremonial staff stay outside the circle. I'm not ceremonial staff. Then you have even less reason to be inside it. Fen clawed once at the stone. A healer approached him, but the wolf snapped his teeth and backed away. Murmurs moved through the courtyard. Adrian turned toward Fen, one hand lifting slowly, palm open. Iyazi. Fen knew that voice. But Fen recoiled. Nora's stomach dropped. She saw it then. 1 crooked stitch beneath the collar's lower edge, almost hidden under thick silver fur. The thread ran against the grain of the leather. No competent leatherworker would do that by accident. The ceremony master raised his staff. Begin the moon renewal. Fen's shoulders tightened. The collar tightened with them. A dark line appeared beneath the fur. Blood. Nora shoved past the guard. Don't let him shift. The words cracked across the courtyard. Every head turned. Adrian's gaze found her instantly. He did not look confused. He looked dangerous. Who are you? No time. 2 guards seized her arms. Fen convulsed as the first wave of his shift moved through him. The collar cinched tighter. Nora fought the guards hard enough to nearly lose her footing. Look at his neck. Adrian looked. That was all she needed. Release her, he ordered. The guards let go. Nora ran. She dropped beside Fen, pulled the small leather knife from her belt, and slid 1 hand beneath the wolf's jaw. Steel flashed around her. Warriors had drawn their swords. Adrian stepped closer. Put the knife down. Nora could feel Fen's pulse hammering against her wrist. The leather was hot now. Unnaturally hot. If I do, he dies. A hush fell over the courtyard. Adrian's eyes hardened, but he did not stop her. Nora hooked the blade beneath the collar. Fen lunged. Someone shouted. His massive body struck her shoulder and drove her to 1 knee, but instead of biting, he pressed his head violently into her hand as if demanding that she finish. Norakut. The collar snapped open. Fen stumbled free, sucking in a ragged breath. Nora fell backward onto the stone. For 1 suspended second, nothing happened. Then the severed collar began to smoke. A sharp metallic hiss rose from inside the leather. The inner lining split, revealing a thin silver wire hidden between the layers. Moonlight touched it. The wire turned red, then brighter. It burned through the leather from the inside out. The smell of scorched hide spread across the sacred circle. Adrian crouched beside the ruined collar. His face had gone still. Nobody touches this, he said. One of the guards turned the leather with the tip of his sword. Something had been stamped beneath the lining, hidden where no inspection would normally find it. Nora saw the mark before anyone said a word. A small W crossed by a leatherworker's awl. Her father's mark. Her family's mark. The Whitlock mark. The guard looked from the burned collar to Nora. Adrian did the same. And this time, when the Alpha King looked at her, there was no question in his eyes about whether she mattered. Only whether she had just saved his wolf or nearly killed him. The courtyard did not move for several heartbeats. Even the nobles nearest the moon circle seemed afraid to breathe. Nora stayed on 1 knee beside Fen, her leather knife still in her hand, while the burned collar smoked between her and the Alpha King. Drop the blade. The command came from Adrian, calm and absolute. Nora set the knife on the stone. 2 guards moved in. One pulled her arms behind her back, while the other stepped between her and Fen. The wolf snarled so sharply that both men froze. Do not provoke him, Adrian said. His eyes never left Nora. Take her to the west chamber. No chains yet. No chains yet. The words landed harder than if he had shouted. I didn't make that collar, Nora said. You will have the opportunity to prove it. That mark was hidden inside the lining. If I wanted anyone to find it, I would have stamped it where they could see. Adrian's expression did not change, but she saw that he had heard the logic. West chamber, he repeated. The room was not a dungeon. It was a narrow stone chamber beside the ceremonial hall, with one table, 3 chairs, and no windows. A guard stood at the door. 10 minutes later, Adrian entered carrying the burned collar in a cloth-lined tray. He placed it on the table. Show me. Nora looked up. Show you what? Everything you saw before you cut it. He had not accused her. Not yet. Nora moved closer. The outer stitching is standard royal work. Even spacing. Waxed black thread. But here, she pointed to the split inner seam. This section was opened after the collar was finished. How can you tell? The grain bends the wrong way. Whoever resealed it stitched against the curve to make the leather pull inward under heat. Adrian's jaw tightened. Nora used a wooden probe to lift part of the lining. Beneath it clung a smear of dark resin. This shouldn't be here either. What is it? I don't know yet. But it was added with the wire. And the wire? Not reinforcement. Too thin. Too soft. It was meant to react, not hold. You knew that before you cut it? I knew the collar was tightening. I didn't know why. His gaze sharpened. Convenient. Nora met it. If I built a weapon that depended on staying hidden, why would I be the one person stupid enough to expose it? Silence. Then Adrian pulled out the chair opposite her and sat. Who still has Whitlock tools? Nora felt something cold move through her chest. No one. That answer is not useful. It's true. My father's workshop was seized 10 years ago. The Crown took his stamps, awls, shears, molds, everything bearing our maker's mark. Adrian still. The Crown has them? Or had them? I was 14. I wasn't invited to the inventory. Before he could answer, a low growl sounded beyond the door. Fen shoved past a protesting healer and entered with dried blood darkening the fur at his throat. The guard reached for his sword. Don't, Nora said. Adrian lifted one hand. The guard stopped. Fen ignored everyone except Nora. He came close, sniffed her sleeve, then stood still. A healer hovered near the doorway. Your Majesty, I need to close the wound. Fen bared his teeth at him. Nora looked at Adrian. May I? After a moment, he nodded. She crouched and examined the cut beneath Fen's fur. The skin was bruised, but the artery had not been damaged. He'll be sore. Nothing deeper. The healer frowned. You're certain? I work with gear made for shifting bodies. I know where badly fitted leather does damage. Fen allowed the healer closer only after Nora kept one hand against his shoulder. Adrian watched. When Fen was led away, he turned back to the collar. The Whitlock mark. Could it be forged? Anyone can copy a symbol. But this impression came from one of our original stamps. You're sure? My father cut that stamp himself. The left arm of the W is shorter, because the steel chipped when I dropped it as a child. For the first time, Adrian looked surprised. Nora glanced toward several old ceremonial pieces brought in for comparison. A hunting harness hung from an iron peg, aged leather fitted with the crest of the previous king. Something about the stitching caught her eye. A memory rose, sharp and unwelcome. She stood and crossed the room. What? Nora lifted the edge of the harness. There it was. The same reversed inner stitch. Her pulse slowed. Whose was this? Adrian's voice changed. My father's. Nora looked at him. When was it last used? He did not answer immediately. Then his face went still. The royal hunt before he died. Adrian did not speak for several seconds. The old hunting harness hung between them, dark with age, its silver fittings dulled by time. Nora kept one hand beneath the inner strap where the reverse stitching ran in a clean, deliberate line. When did your father die? She asked. 3 days after that hunt. From what? A fever after an injury. Nora looked at the seam again. Was the injury caused by this harness? No. Adrian's answer came too quickly, then slowed. His horse threw him. The saddle girth snapped during the descent from Blackridge. Nora's gaze lifted. You still have the saddle? Adrian turned toward the guard. Bring every piece of tack from King Edric's final hunt to the West Archive. Nothing leaves the room without my order. The guard bowed and disappeared. Nora let the old harness fall back into place. If the same stitching was used 10 years ago, then whoever altered Fenn's collar didn't invent this method for tonight. No. And if your father's equipment was compromised before he died, that is not yet a conclusion. Nora met his eyes. I know. Something in his expression shifted, not softer, but more attentive. Within the hour, the West Archive had become a controlled mess of leather, buckles, ledgers, and sealed storage boxes. Adrian dismissed most of the ceremonial staff and kept only 2 guards, a records clerk, and Nora. He did not release her from suspicion. He simply moved her closer to the evidence. You'll remain in the castle, he said. Nora looked up from a cracked bridle. As a guest? As someone whose name was found inside an attempted attack on my wolf. So, no. As someone under protection. She gave him a flat look. Adrian's mouth almost moved. Protection and custody can resemble each other. At least you know. He ignored that. If someone used your family's tools, they may decide you are more dangerous alive than accused. That landed harder than she expected. Nora returned to the bridle. Then whoever they are should hope I don't find them first. You are not hunting anyone. I'm examining leather. Under guard. Then your guards can admire my stitching. One of the men near the door coughed into his fist. Adrian looked at him once. The guard immediately became fascinated by the opposite wall. By late afternoon, Nora had examined 9 ceremonial pieces and found no second hidden wire. That bothered her more than if she had found 10. A pattern should repeat. This one had vanished. The only matching feature was the reverse seam on King Edric's old hunting harness, and even that lacked the black residue from Fenn's collar. A man entered just before sunset wearing formal charcoal robes trimmed in silver. He was perhaps 50. Composed, clean-shaven, with the kind of calm that suggested he had spent years in rooms where other men lost theirs. Your Majesty, Adrian nodded. Lord Voss. The man's eyes moved to Nora, then to the ruined collar. Julian Voss, he said, master of royal oaths. Nora Whitlock. I know. There was no accusation in his voice. That was almost worse. Julian stepped closer to the table. I was told your family's mark was found inside the collar. It was. And that you were the one who cut it off, Fenn. Yes. Julian looked at Adrian. Then I would advise against treating the mark as proof of guilt. A hidden signature is useful only if someone expects it to be found later. Nora studied him. He had just made her own argument. Adrian said, You oversee ceremonial regalia. I oversee certification. Workshops produce the pieces. My office records and seals them. Who had access to Fenn's collar after inspection? Julian's expression tightened. On paper? 6 people. In practice, perhaps more. I'll provide every name. He left without protest, without defensiveness, and without looking back. Nora waited until the door closed. You trust him? I trust records until they give me a reason not to. That sounds dangerous. It is less dangerous than trusting impressions. Nora glanced at the burned collar. Someone trusted a record when they cleared this. Adrian said nothing. The records clerk brought 3 ledgers from ceremonial storage. Nora began comparing dates, repair orders, and material entries. Most of it was useless. Buckles, oil, thread, saddle leather, wolf harness replacements. Then she noticed the binding. One ledger sat slightly looser near the center. Nora ran her thumb along the spine. What? Adrian asked. This book is missing a page. The clerk frowned. Pages tear. This one didn't. Nora angled the ledger toward the light. A narrow, perfectly straight edge remained close to the binding. Someone cut it out. Adrian came beside her. The previous page listed silver stock for ceremonial weapons. The following page listed winter tack repairs. Nora checked the index. Her finger stopped. Entry 214. Moonbind silver inventory. Adrian read the year written beside it. 10 years ago. Nora felt the room grow smaller. The same year my father's workshop was seized. Adrian's gaze stayed on the missing page. And the same year mine died. The missing page changed the mood of the archive. Until then, Adrian had treated every clue as a problem to be sorted. Now he stood over the ledger, staring at the narrow cut near the binding as though it had opened a door he had spent 10 years refusing to see. Who controlled ceremonial inventory then? Nora asked. The office has changed names twice. That wasn't my question. Adrian looked at her. Lord Voss served as deputy master. Nora said nothing. He straightened. That does not make him guilty. No, it makes him relevant. For the first time, Adrian did not argue. They worked until midnight. The clerk was dismissed. The guards remained outside while Nora searched old tack and Adrian compared inspection seals against storage dates. The deeper they went, the stranger the pattern became. King Edric's final hunting gear had passed inspection twice. Fenn's collar had passed inspection 3 days before the moon oath. Both records were clean. Too clean. Nora had spent years repairing work that failed honestly. Honest mistakes left patterns. These records had no rough edges, no hesitation, nothing that looked human. That frightened her more tonight. A low sound stopped Nora. Not a growl. A whine. Fenn. She followed it into the adjoining passage. Adrian was already there, kneeling beside the royal wolf beneath a narrow window. His coat and crown were gone. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. A basin of water sat at his knee. Fenn's wounded neck rested across Adrian's thigh. Nora paused. She had seen kings painted in halls and stamped onto coins. None had prepared her for an alpha king quietly washing blood from silver fur. You sent the healer away, she said. Fenn sent him away. Fenn opened one eye and huffed. Nora came closer. You're wrapping that too tight. Adrian looked down. Move. One brow lifted. If you want him comfortable? Adrian shifted aside. Nora knelt and loosened the cloth. Fenn did not resist. She checked the swelling, then retied it with less pressure. He needs room when the muscles move. I know how to bandage a wound. Apparently not a wolf's neck. A pause. Then Adrian gave a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. It changed his face. Only for a second. Nora noticed anyway. What was your father's name? He asked. Alias Whitlock. Adrian's gaze lowered. I remember the judgment. Nora's hand stopped. You were there? I was 19. My father signed it. She looked at him. He was accused of weakening a royal saddle girth, Adrian continued. The report said negligence. The workshop was seized. His license revoked. He never admitted it. Did you believe him? Every day. Why? Because he taught me what a broken strap looks like. What bad leather feels like. What careless stitching does under pressure. Her voice hardened. The girth they showed at the hearing had been cut after it failed. My father said so. No one listened. Adrian went still. He didn't die because we lost money, Nora said. He died because every official document in the kingdom said he was a liar. Adrian was quiet. My father became suspicious of everyone after the attempt on his life. He trusted sealed reports because he trusted almost nothing else. And that made the reports powerful. Yes, powerful enough to erase a man. Adrian did not defend his father. That mattered more than an apology. He rose and offered Nora a hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm and careful. She released him first. Back in the archive, they examined King Edric's hunting saddle. Nora found a shallow groove near the broken girth ring. Here. Adrian leaned over her shoulder. This wasn't wear, Nora said. Something thin was drawn through the leather. Wire? Possibly. She compared the groove to Fenn's burned collar. Same width. Adrian opened a locked drawer containing ceremonial tools. Inside lay silver shears, awls, punches, and seal presses. Nora picked up the shears. These could cut the wire. Who has access? Royal Workshop Masters. The Master of Oaths. 2 senior armorers. And Voss. And Voss. A crash sounded from the outer room. Adrian moved before Nora could turn. The archive door slammed open. A hooded figure seized the burned collar from the evidence table and ran. "Stop!" Adrian chased him into the passage. Nora followed far enough to see the intruder vault a stair rail and disappear below. One guard went after him. Something lay on the floor where the man had struck the table. A strip of black leather. Nora picked it up. Fresh cut. Fine grain. Silver-edged. Adrian returned moments later. He got away. Nora held up the strip. "What is it?" he asked. "Ceremonial grade." She turned it over. On the back was a crescent-shaped guide mark used only for bindings prepared for the moon renewal circle. Adrian's expression tightened. Nora looked at him. "When is the renewal?" 3 days. She closed her fingers around the leather. Then Fenn's collar wasn't the end of this. Adrian looked toward the dark corridor. "No," he said. "It was the beginning." The strip of ceremonial leather remained on the archive table until dawn. Nora had turned it over so many times that the crescent guide mark seemed burned into her thoughts. Whoever had broken into the room had not come for money, records, or weapons. He had come for Fenn's collar. That meant the collar still mattered. Adrian stood at the far end of the table, reading the moon renewal protocols while Mason Gray, his beta commander, reviewed guard reports from the failed pursuit. Mason was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and unsmiling in the way of a man who considered wasted words a personal insult. "No face," Mason said. "No scent we could hold." He crossed the lower yard before the gates were sealed. "He knew the castle," Adrian said. He knew exactly where the archive exits opened. Nora barely heard them. She had scraped a tiny amount of the black residue from Fenn's collar onto a porcelain dish and was warming it above a lamp. The resin softened first. Then a bitter, earthy smell rose from it. She froze. "What?" Adrian asked. Nora lowered the dish. "Blackroot," Mason frowned. "Poison?" "In enough quantity." Adrian came closer. "Was there enough in the collar to kill Fenn?" Nora looked at the residue, then at the inner leather. Something had bothered her since the ceremony. The wire had tightened violently, but Fenn had recovered too quickly once the collar was removed. If the purpose had been death, whoever designed it had been strangely cautious. "No." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Not even close," Nora said. "This amount could make him disoriented. Dull his nose. Maybe interfere with scent recognition for a few minutes, especially combined with heat." Mason looked toward Fenn, who slept near the hearth. Then why hide silver wire inside the collar? Nora thought of the wire glowing under moonlight, the scent of scorched leather, Fenn recoiling from Adrian before the collar was cut. Her stomach tightened. The wire wasn't there to strangle him. Adrian's voice lowered. "Explain. Moonbind silver reacts to bonded scent and body heat, doesn't it?" "Yes. What happens if you reverse the stitch around it and coat the lining with blackroot resin?" Adrian said nothing. Nora answered herself. "The collar tightens. The resin heats. Fenn breathes it in." Mason's expression changed first. He stops recognizing the king. Nora looked at Adrian. Temporarily. The room went silent. Adrian moved to the window. Below, servants were preparing the courtyard for the renewal ceremony, hanging silver banners, checking braziers, marking the sacred circle. Nora watched his face. "What happens during the renewal?" she asked. Mason glanced at Adrian. But the king answered. "Fenn enters the moon circle with me. And? He acknowledges the bond before the council." "How?" "He approaches me, accepts my scent, places his head beneath my hand." Nora understood. What if he doesn't? Adrian turned. "The ritual is older than the current crown." "That isn't an answer." His jaw tightened. Mason spoke quietly. "If the royal wolf rejects the reigning alpha during moon renewal, any recognized bloodline may petition the council for succession challenge." Nora stared at him. "Rejects how?" "A refusal to approach is enough to open inquiry," Adrian said. "An attack is worse." Fenn had nearly attacked him in the courtyard. Nora felt cold despite the fire. They tested it. Not a murder attempt. A rehearsal staged in public, where panic would hide what they needed to learn from Fenn. Adrian's gaze sharpened. "The collar," she said. "They weren't trying to finish anything. They were measuring how much resin it took. How quickly Fenn lost your scent. Whether the silver accelerated it." Mason swore under his breath. Nora looked toward the ceremonial preparations below. They don't want you dead. Adrian's expression did not move. They want Fen alive, she continued. They need everyone to see him reject you. Mason stepped toward the table. We cancel the renewal. No, Adrian said. Nora turned on him. If they can do this again, if I cancel 3 days before the ceremony, every lord already questioning the crown will know something is wrong. You would rather walk into a trap? I would rather know where the trap is. That sounds like the sort of sentence kings say before other people have to carry them out bleeding. Mason looked away, perhaps to hide a reaction. Adrian did not. If the ceremony proceeds, Nora said, they will need another delivery method. Fen will not wear that collar again. Then we find it. And if we don't? Adrian looked down into the courtyard where the moon circle was being prepared. The renewal happens in 3 days. Nora studied him. What happens if Fen rejects you in front of everyone? This time, Adrian did not soften the answer. By sunrise, he said, I may no longer be king. The next morning, Adrian took Nora beyond the inner walls of the castle for the first time since the moon oath. Mason rode behind them with 4 guards. But even with an escort, the journey felt less like custody than movement toward something neither of them could yet name. The Whitlock workshop stood at the edge of the old craftsman's quarter, boarded shut beneath 10 years of weather. Nora stopped in front of it. For a moment, she was 14 again. Her father's sign still hung above the door. The painted W almost erased by rain. Adrian looked at her. We can send someone else in. No, Nora. If there's something left inside, I want to be the one who finds it. He held her gaze, then nodded. Mason broke the royal seal. The door opened with a groan. Dust covered everything. Workbenches, racks, cutting boards, leather stretched stiff with age. The crown had taken the tools, but it had left the shape of a life behind. Nora walked slowly through it. This was his table, she said. Adrian stayed near the door at first, giving her space. That, more than any apology could have, made it easier to breathe. She opened drawers one by one. Empty. Empty. Molded scraps. Broken buckles. Then she found a false bottom beneath the dye cabinet. Inside lay a small oilskin notebook. Her hands shook before she even opened it. Elias Whitlock's handwriting filled the pages. Measurements. Orders. Repairs. Then, near the back, the entries changed. 3 ceremonial harnesses reopened after inspection. Silver fittings replaced without authorization. Reverse stitching beneath sealed leather. Nora read faster. He knew. Adrian came beside her. What? My father knew someone was tampering with royal equipment. She turned the notebook toward him. The final entry was short. Reported irregularities to the Deputy Master of Oaths. Requested private review. No reply. Adrian's face hardened. 10 years ago, Nora said. Who was Deputy Master? He did not need to answer. Julian Voss. A sound came from the front room. A click. Mason shouted, Move! The workshop door slammed. Then Nora smelled smoke. Not fireplace smoke. Oil. Flame raced up the outside shutters. They locked us in, she said. Adrian drew his sword and struck the door. But something heavy had been wedged against it from outside. Mason and the guards attacked the rear wall. Smoke rolled across the ceiling. Nora looked around the workshop. She knew this room. Her father had once warned her that a leather shop could become a furnace in seconds. There's a curing hatch. Adrian turned. Where? Under the stretching rack. They shoved the rack aside. Beneath it, nearly invisible under dust, was an iron ring set into the floor. Nora pulled. The hatch resisted. Adrian seized the ring beside her and tore it upward. Cold air rushed in from a narrow stone passage beneath the workshop. Go, he ordered. Nora dropped into the opening. A beam cracked overhead. Adrian shoved her down as burning timber crashed across the floor where she had been standing. He followed a second later, smoke blackening one side of his face. They emerged behind the workshop into an alley while Mason and the others broke through from another exit. By the time the fire was contained, half the roof was gone. The notebook survived because Nora had stuffed it beneath her coat. Adrian stared at the burning workshop. They knew we were coming. Or they knew what was still inside. His eyes moved to the notebook. For the first time, the conspiracy was no longer 10-year-old suspicion. It had just tried to burn them alive. Back at the castle, they worked through the notebook until night. One entry matched a royal commission number still preserved in the archives. Adrian traced it to a ceremonial silver withdrawal signed by Voss's office 2 days after Elias Whitlock filed his complaint. It was not enough to convict him, but it was enough to stop calling the pattern coincidence. Near midnight, Nora stood at the work table fitting a replacement wrist strap to one of Adrian's field bracers. He had removed his gauntlet so she could measure the leather correctly. "Hold still." "I am holding still. You're an alpha king. I assume someone has lied to you about that before." His mouth curved. Fen slept beneath the table, one ear twitching. Nora wrapped the measuring strip around Adrian's wrist. His skin was warm beneath her fingers. Neither of them spoke. The silence changed. Adrian looked down at her hand, then at her face. Nora became suddenly aware of how close he was. Too close for a king and a suspect. Too close for either of them to pretend this was only about evidence. He lifted his hand slightly. "Nora." She stepped back. "You still don't know if I'm innocent." "That is not what I was thinking about." "It should be." Something tightened in his expression, but he let his hand fall. A knock sounded. Mason entered carrying a leather courier satchel. "We caught someone outside the east gate." Adrian's attention sharpened instantly. "Who?" "Wouldn't give a name. Tried to swallow this." Mason placed a folded receipt on the table. Nora opened it. Blackroot resin. Moonbintwire. Workshop access fee. All purchased under one name. Her own. At the bottom was a signature. Nora Whitlock. The handwriting looked exactly like hers. Even the final flourish was perfect. The receipt lay between Nora and Adrian like a verdict waiting for someone brave enough to speak it aloud. Mason stood near the door, arms folded. "The courier says a woman matching your description paid him 2 nights ago." "I was in the archive 2 nights ago. With me," Adrian said. Mason nodded. "That helps." "It does not erase the signature." Nora looked again at the page. Whoever had copied her hand knew more than the shape of her letters. They knew where she hesitated, how she crossed the final T, even the small upward curve she used when writing her surname. "This was made from something I actually wrote." Adrian's eyes lifted. "Who has access to your records?" "The Crown does." Silence. They searched her room before dawn. Nora insisted on being present. The first thing they found was a coil of moonbind wire beneath the bottom drawer of her wardrobe. The second was a sealed jar of blackroot resin hidden behind the washstand. The third was worse. Inside a wrapped bundle beneath the bed lay an unfinished wolf collar, its inner seam stitched in reverse. Mason swore. Adrian did not move. Nora stared at the collar. "I have never seen that before." One of the guards opened a smaller cloth pouch beside it. A steel stamp fell into his palm. A W crossed by a leather worker's awl. Whitlock. This time, Nora felt something inside her go very still. "That's one of my father's tools." Adrian stepped closer. "You're certain?" "The chip is on the left arm." The same defect she had described before. "Perfect evidence." "Too perfect." Nora looked at Adrian. "Someone wants you to stop asking questions." "I have not stopped." "Not yet." His expression hardened at that. Earlier that morning, a stable boy had sworn he saw Nora near the workshop after midnight. She had been with Adrian then too, reviewing her father's notebook. The lie should have reassured her. Instead, it frightened her. Whoever was building the case did not need every detail to survive scrutiny. They only needed enough accusations to make the truth sound like the desperate part. By midday, the castle had begun to whisper. Nora felt it in every corridor. Servants lowered their voices when she passed. Guards watched her hands. 2 council members openly demanded her confinement until the renewal. Adrian refused. "She remains under investigation," he told them. "She is not convicted." For one dangerous moment, Nora almost believed that would be enough. Then the palace wardrobe sent her a coat. It was dark blue, fitted for court, with silver stitching at the cuffs. Nora had received it days earlier but had barely worn it. The renewal chamber was cold, and a maid insisted she take it before entering the western hall. Fen was already there. Adrian stood beside the long council table with Mason and 3 senior lords. The wolf lifted his head when Nora entered. Then everything changed. Fen froze, his lips pulled back. "Fen?" Adrian said. The wolf's ears flattened. He turned toward Adrian and growled. Nora stopped walking. "Adrian, don't," Fen lunged. Adrian twisted aside, but not fast enough. Claws tore across his shoulder and sent him crashing into the table. Guards rushed forward. "Hold!" Adrian's command cracked through the room. Fen snapped at empty air, confused and furious. Nora tore off the coat. "Get this away from me." Mason seized it from the floor. Fen's head followed the movement, but no one noticed. Not yet. Blood ran down Adrian's arm. The council chamber erupted. "She brought something in. Seize her! This is the second attack." Nora could have run. The side door stood open. Guards were focused on Fen. For 3 seconds, perhaps 4, no one blocked her path. She stayed. Slowly, she drew her leather knife and placed it on the floor. Then she lowered herself to her knees. Find out what they did to him before the ceremony. Adrian stood with one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. His face was pale, controlled, unreadable. Mason moved beside him. "Your Majesty." Nora looked at Adrian and understood the choice before he made it. The receipt, the wire, the resin, the collar, the Whitlock stamp. And now Fen had attacked his own alpha the moment she entered the room. Every official piece of evidence pointed in one direction. "Here." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Chain her." The words were quiet. They still struck harder than a shout. 2 guards came toward Nora. She did not resist. She did not plead. She only looked at Adrian. For 1 second, he looked less like the Alpha King and more like the son of a man who had once trusted the wrong evidence. Then the guards closed iron around her wrists. As they pulled her toward the door, Fen gave another low growl. Nora turned. The royal wolf was not looking at her. He was staring at the dark blue coat in Mason's hands. His hackles rose. Mason slowly lowered the coat toward the floor. Finn snarled at it. Not at Nora. At the coat. The cell was cleaner than the one Nora had imagined during the walk down. That almost made it worse. There was no straw, no dripping ceiling, no cruelty she could point to and hate. Just stone, iron, a narrow cot, and 2 chains fixed to the wall. Official. Orderly. Reasonable. Exactly like the judgment that had destroyed her father. Nora sat with her wrists resting against her knees and listened to the castle move above her. Somewhere beyond the walls, servants were preparing for the moon renewal. Somewhere, council members were deciding whether the Omega who had saved the royal wolf had actually been the one poisoning him all along. The Crown had built a story around Elias Whitlock once. Now it had built one around her. A lock turned. Mason entered carrying the dark blue coat. Nora stood. "Take that away from me." "I intend to." He did not come closer. Instead, he placed the coat on a wooden chair outside the bars. A growl rolled through the corridor. Fen appeared behind him. The royal wolf's eyes locked on the coat. His hackles rose instantly. Mason moved the coat 3 feet to the left. Fen followed it with his head. Then Mason stepped toward Nora's cell without the coat. Fen's growl stopped. Nora stared. "Open the door." Mason hesitated. "If I'm the problem, he'll react when I come near him." The beta unlocked the cell but left the chains on her wrists. Nora stepped into the corridor. Fen watched her. Nothing. She moved closer. Still nothing. Then Fen crossed the final distance himself and pressed his scarred throat against her hand. Mason's face changed. Nora looked at the coat, cut the lining. They took it to a guard table. Mason opened the seam with Nora's leather knife while Fen paced several feet away. A bitter smell rose from the wool. Blackroot. Nora closed her eyes. Not enough to poison a person. More than enough to cling to fabric and confuse a wolf already sensitized by the first exposure. "Who issued the coat?" she asked. Mason was already calling for the wardrobe ledger. The answer arrived 10 minutes later. Royal Ceremony Wardrobe. Authorized under the Office of Oaths. Julian Voss. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. Adrian came alone. His injured shoulder had been bandaged beneath a plain black shirt. He stopped when he saw Nora standing outside the cell. For a moment, neither spoke. Mason handed him the cut coat. Blackroot in the lining. Fen reacts to the coat, not to her. Adrian looked at Nora. She did not make this easy for him. Take the chains off, he said. Mason reached for the key. No, Adrian said. I put them on her. He took the key himself. The first cuff opened, then the second. Iron fell away from Nora's wrists. Adrian did not say he had no choice. He did not blame the council, the evidence, Fen, or the attack. I was wrong. Nora rubbed the red marks on her skin. Yes, the word struck cleanly. He accepted it. I believed a case someone built for me. You believed it because it looked official. Yes, that was exactly how they destroyed my father. Adrian's face tightened. Yes, Nora wanted him to defend himself. It would have been easier to stay angry if he had. Instead, he said, "Help me stop them." She laughed once without humor. You think I'm doing this for you? No. Good. I think you're doing it because if Voss succeeds tomorrow, every ambitious alpha with a blood claim will turn this kingdom into a battlefield. Nora looked at him for a long moment. At least you've learned something. They returned to the archive before the council could be informed that Nora had been released. This time, they stopped examining clues separately. They built a chain. The Whitlock stamp had been confiscated by the crown 10 years earlier. Julian's office had access to seized ceremonial tools. Moonbind silver disappeared from inventory after Elias Whitlock reported tampering. Blackroot had been purchased through a ceremonial supply account. The courier had been paid from the same account. Nora's false receipt had copied a signature preserved in an old royal repair ledger. The coat came directly from ceremony wardrobe, and Elias's notebook proved someone had been reopening inspected equipment long before Fen's collar was made. Adrian placed both hands on the table. It is enough to arrest Voss. Maybe. He looked at her. That is not agreement. It's enough to show he built the evidence against me. It doesn't tell us how he plans to reach Fen during the renewal. The regalia has been replaced. The food? Controlled. Water? Controlled. Floor coverings? Inspected. Nora paced. Something was wrong. They had removed the collar, watched Fen's meals, locked the workshop, restricted handlers. Yet Voss had continued preparing for the ceremony. Why? Because he did not need to touch Fen. Nora stopped. A memory surfaced. The burned collar. Blackroot. Hotsilver. And beneath both another scent. Dry. Smoky. Tidar. She turned toward Adrian. What burns in the moon circle? Braziers. What kind of wood? His expression changed. Tidar. Nora's pulse kicked hard. The collar had not only carried blackroot, it had been exposed to cedar ash. Attest. Not of the collar. Of the delivery method. Fen won't need to wear anything, she said. Adrian was already moving. From high above the archive, a bell rang. Once, then again. Mason entered at a run. Your Majesty. The council advanced the renewal. Adrian went still. How long? The first procession has already entered the courtyard. A third bell sounded. Nora looked at Adrian. The collar was never the real weapon. Outside, the ritual bells began to ring. The fourth bell was still ringing when Adrian and Nora reached the moon courtyard. The ceremony had already begun. Silver banners snapped in the cold wind. Nobles filled the stone galleries, while warriors formed a circle around the ritual ground. At the center stood Julian Voss in ceremonial black, one hand raised over the first brazier. Fen waited beside the moon gate. The royal wolf looked wrong. Not injured. Not afraid. Lost. His head turned from Adrian to the crowd, then back again, as if every scent reached him blurred and unfamiliar. Nora smelled cedar smoke, and beneath it, bitter blackroot. Put out the braziers! Her voice cut across the ritual. Hundreds of faces turned. Julian's hand stopped. Adrian entered the circle beside her. Your Majesty, Julian said, the renewal has begun. Sacred fire cannot be extinguished once the oath is called. Put them out, Nora repeated. A murmur rolled through the galleries. One council lord stepped forward. If the king breaks the renewal before acknowledgement, Julian lowered his hand. Surely His Majesty understands the law. Adrian looked at Fen. The wolf backed away from him. For one terrible second, Nora saw doubt pass through the crowd. This was what Julian had wanted. Not a dead king. A kingdom watching its sacred wolf refuse him. Adrian looked at Nora. She did not explain again. He had heard the evidence. Now he had to choose what he trusted. Extinguish every fire, he ordered. No one moved. Adrian's voice dropped. That was a command. Mason kicked over the nearest brazier. Warriors followed. Hot coals scattered across the stone and hissed beneath water. One brazier after another went dark. Julian's composure cracked. Stop them! Mason turned toward him. Interesting choice of words. Julian recovered. I am protecting the law. No, Nora said. You're protecting the smoke. She crossed to the nearest dead brazier and lifted a half-burned piece of cedar with metal tongs. Black glaze coated one side. Blackroot resin. Julian smiled faintly. A leather worker is now an herbalist? No. But I know what was inside the collar you tried to steal. The courtyard went silent. Nora faced the council. The collar was a test. Reverse stitching tightened moonbind silver around Fenn's throat, while Blackroot heated beneath the lining. It dulled his scent recognition. Tonight, the same resin was placed in the braziers, so Fenn would breathe it without anyone touching him. Julian shook his head. A theory from an accused woman. Then let's talk about the accusation. Nora held up her wrists, where chain marks remained. The Whitlock stamp found in my room was real because the Crown seized my father's tools 10 years ago. Mason placed the stamp on the council table. Seizure inventory confirmed. Nora continued. The missing moonbind silver was withdrawn after my father reported ceremonial equipment being reopened after inspection. His report went to the Deputy Master of Oaths. Every eye moved toward Julian. He held that office, Adrian said. Julian's smile disappeared. The Blackroot used in Fenn's collar was purchased through a ceremonial account, Nora said. The courier carrying the false receipt was paid from that account. My signature was copied from a royal repair ledger. The coat that triggered Fenn's attack came from ceremony wardrobe. Mason placed the cut coat beside the stamp. Authorized by Lord Voss's office. Julian looked around the circle. Administrative access is not guilt. No, Nora said. But burning my father's workshop after we found his notebook was careless. A stir moved through the nobles. Julian's face changed. Only slightly. Enough. Adrian saw it. Nora pointed to the extinguished braziers. And this is worse. Mason scraped black residue from one bowl into a silver dish. The smell spread immediately. Bitter. Earthy. Identical. Fenn sneezed and shook his head. Then the wolf lifted his muzzle. He breathed once. Twice. His ears turned toward Adrian. No one spoke. Adrian stood alone at the center of the moon circle. Fenn stared at him. Then the royal wolf walked. One step. Another. Past the council. Past Nora. Straight to Adrian. He stopped before the Alpha King and pressed his forehead beneath Adrian's open hand. The courtyard released a single enormous breath. A kingdom realizing it had almost believed a lie. Julian stepped backward. The ritual is compromised. The acknowledgement cannot stand. Adrian kept one hand on Fenn. The wolf seems less confused than you hoped. Julian turned. Mason moved to block him. For the first time, panic replaced control. Julian ran toward the servants' passage. Nora saw where he was going. Above the passage hung the heavy ceremonial screen, raised by leather tension straps. Her father had repaired the same mechanism years ago. Move. Mason shifted aside. Nora seized her leather knife from his belt, reached the nearest support line, and cut one strap. The screen dropped. Not onto Julian. In front of him, weighted rods slammed against stone. Julian collided with the cloth and stumbled backward. Mason hit him from the side. Warriors closed in. Within seconds, Julian was on his knees with his arms forced behind him. His eyes found Nora. You have no idea what your father nearly destroyed. Nora stopped. Edric was weak, Julian said. Paranoid. Adrian would have become the same. The kingdom needed rulers who could be managed before another Vare tore it apart. My father found you. He found a stitch. And you ruined him for it. Julian said nothing. That was answer enough. Adrian stepped toward the council. The courtyard fell quiet. My father signed the judgment against Elias Whitlock, he said. That judgment was built on manipulated evidence and protected those sabotaging the crown. Nora looked at him. He could have buried it, protected the royal name. Instead, Adrian faced the entire kingdom. Let the record show that Elias Whitlock was innocent. Nora could not move. For 10 years, Her father's name had existed beneath a sentence someone else had written. Adrian spoke again. And let the record show that Nora Whitlock uncovered the truth the Crown failed to see. Fen stood beside him. Adrian looked across the circle at Nora. This time there was no suspicion in his eyes. Only trust. And for the first time in her life, the truth did not need to beg to be believed. The morning after Julian Voss was taken below the castle, Nora woke before sunrise. But inside the castle, the record had changed. By noon, Adrian convened the council. Nora stood at the edge of the chamber, while a clerk read the formal reversal of Elias Whitlock's conviction. Every accusation was struck from the royal ledger. The seizure order against the Whitlock workshop was voided. The judgment that had named her father negligent and dishonest was declared false. Nora listened without moving. She had imagined this moment many times. Instead, it felt like setting down something heavy she had carried so long that her body had forgotten it was there. Adrian faced the council. "My father's seal does not make a false judgment true," he said. "And mine will not be used to protect it." The Whitlock workshop was restored to Nora. Adrian also separated the Office of Oaths from ceremonial inspection. No single official would again control production, storage, certification, and final approval. Supply ledgers would be duplicated. Seized tools would be recorded outside the department that confiscated them. Inspection findings could not be removed by private order. 3 days later, Adrian summoned Nora to the council chamber. There was one empty chair. "What is this?" she asked. "A problem. That sounds familiar. I need someone to lead an independent commission for royal equipment. You need a leather worker. I need someone who understands what happens when everyone assumes the seal at the bottom of a page makes the page honest." Nora folded her arms. "And if the king dislikes my findings? He reads them. And if he orders me to change them? He can't. Because if you accept, the charter will forbid him from doing so." She glanced at the council members. Several looked unhappy. That helped. "I want the same protection for every inspector." Adrian nodded. "No royal override." "Yes. And reports go to the council archive before they come to you." Adrian almost smiled. "Done." Nora took the empty chair. Weeks passed. Winter began to loosen its hold. The new system found accounting errors, dangerous equipment flaws, and one quartermaster who had decided stealing saddle oil was a reasonable retirement plan. Nora enjoyed the work. More importantly, it was hers. Adrian did not interfere. He did not ask her to stay at court. He did not speak about what had almost happened between them. That restraint irritated her more than she expected. One evening, she was fitting a new collar to Fen in the restored Whitlock workshop when the door opened. Adrian entered without guards. No crown, no ceremonial coat. Just Adrian. Fen lifted his head, saw him, and returned to chewing dried meat. Adrian examined the collar. "No silver? No. No royal crest? No. No ceremonial stitching?" Nora tightened the buckle. "It only needs to do its job." Adrian leaned against the workbench. "Your commission report called 3 of my procedures unnecessarily decorative." "They were. You called another expensive nonsense." "I was being polite." He laughed. Nora smiled despite herself. Then the room settled. Adrian looked at her, not as a king addressing an inspector or an alpha studying a suspect. "Nora." She waited. "I spent most of my life learning how to command people. That explains a great deal. You are the first person I have wanted beside me, who I have no right to command." Her smile faded. Adrian stepped closer. "I won't ask you to stay because I'm king." "Good. I'm asking as Adrian." Fen moved between them and sat with a heavy sigh. Nora looked at the man before her. He had believed the wrong evidence. He had chained her. Then he had done something harder than apologizing. He had changed the system that allowed his mistake to happen. He had restored her father's name without asking her to protect his. "You haven't told me what you're asking me to stay for. For as long as you choose." The answer reached deeper than she expected. Nora looked down at Fen's plain collar. Strong. Simple. Honest about what it was meant to do. When she looked back at Adrian, she held out her hand. He stared for half a second before taking it. His fingers closed around hers carefully. Not possession. Not command. A choice answered by another choice. Outside, the evening bells rang across the castle. Nora had once believed powerful people decided which truths survived, She knew better now. Truth survived because someone was willing to speak it, and someone else was willing to hear it. Fen leaned against their legs. Adrian looked down at him. I think he approves. He has better judgment than you. That is becoming a troubling pattern. Nora laughed. When Adrian lifted her hand and pressed a quiet kiss to her knuckles, she did not pull away. Not because an Alpha King had chosen an Omega. Not because the crown had finally returned what it had stolen. But because when the choice became hers, fully and freely hers, Nora Whitlock knew exactly where she wanted to stand.